Hey, everybody. Another episode of Always Bookin Comedy. We got Brad Galli from Denver, Colorado. We're on every Monday night. This is a special pre-taped edition. Brad, a very busy guy, has something to do. So no live questions tonight, but enjoy this replay. Brad, how you doing today?
Good. How are you, Mark? Thanks for having me.
I'm good, man. How are the Rockies?
Oh, they're bad, but
They're
you know,
bad. Okay.
I still love them. They've turned it around a little bit in the past week or so. They got some young guys, so they've been kind of exciting to watch. But yeah, still bad.
That's cool. Brad, a big Rockies fan.
Yeah.
Also a big comedy guy. Interesting. Several people who have heard about this web series, podcast, whatever you want to call it, have said, "Have you talked to Brad Galli?" And I know you as a hilarious comedian. Like, you're so funny. I remember when I was just getting started, you were one of the top comics that I really enjoyed. You have that air duct bit that just blew my mind the first time I saw you do it. And just so clever, so smart. I didn't even know really that you ran shows, but then I talked to some people and it turns out you have an extensive history in running shows. So I'm very excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, I guess
is that true?
I guess I do. Yeah.
I guess you do. Okay. Well, let's go. So how long have you been doing comedy? A long time, right?
The first time I got up was February 2nd, 2010. So over 13 years ago. I was out of comedy for about a year and a half to finish college from end of 2015 through 2016. So total, I've been doing comedy about 11 years because there was some time off in there.
10 plus years. That makes me feel better because you are so funny and so good on stage.
Well, thank you.
That's obviously a skill and a lot of practice. So when did you start running shows?
Well, when I started doing comedy, the first year, 2010, I still lived in Pueblo, Colorado. So the first year I was still down there. And now there's a little bit of a comedy scene down there, but there was nothing in Pueblo when I first started. So anytime that I wanted to get up, I was, driving 2 hours to Denver just to do an open mic. Or, driving an hour to the Springs to try to get some stage time. And I worked at a restaurant at the time down there. And they found out I was just doing comedy, and they had a little stage and a little bar area. They're like, well, why don't you do a comedy show here? So probably the first time I produced a comedy show, I was maybe, 6 or 7 months into comedy and just doing it at the restaurant there. Had no idea what I was doing and made a lot. Yeah.
Do you remember who your headliner was?
What's up?
Do you remember who your headliner was?
Yeah. For the first show, Bobby Crane was the headliner. Do you remember Bobby Crane?
I don't know.
He probably had moved when you were starting in the scene, but he was part of the Fine Gentlemen's Club, which was Sam Talent, Nathan Lund, Chris Charpentier. And he had just won the New Faces contest at Comedy Works. And I had done New Talent Night 2 or 3 times at that point in my short 6 or 7 months doing stand-up. So I knew him. I knew he had won. And he actually headlined the show, and Sam Talent and Nathan Lund opened for him. So it was a really good lineup. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible, Brad. That's so cool.
And I, not knowing at the time, any 3 of those guys could have headlined. I mean, Sam and Lund had been doing comedy longer than Bobby, but I knew Bobby had won the contest. So I'm like, oh, he should headline. He won the contest.
Right.
We'll let him headline. And little did I know that's the first time he got to headline a show. So that was a big deal for him. But people liked it. They had fun. I remember them being on the show, and I think I had 2 or 3 guys that I had met in the spring scene at the time do the show.
Okay.
I think a guy by the name of Jamal Gushan, who's doing comedy in Chicago now. And there was a guy named Adam White who doesn't do stand-up anymore. And I forget who the other one was. But I remember early on doing those shows, I overbooked them. It was too many comedians just because I wanted to be well, it's the more, the better. Not understanding. It's you want to keep a show to an hour and a half because people get tired. I'm just no, they're just going to they'll love a longer show. So I overbooked them. Didn't really know. I mean, I was always honest about pay. I wasn't getting paid. I think I was getting maybe $100 to do that show. And God knows, I think Bobby did it for $50. And Sam and Lund maybe got 20 apiece. And they drove to Pueblo from Denver for that. So, but they were pretty new in their career.
Yeah. It'd be hard to get them for that now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Especially Sam. Wow. Mm-hmm. What a crazy story. Any other lessons you learned or things you look back on, wish you did differently at those early shows?
Oh God, yeah. So I started doing that show in Pueblo. I think it was like October of 2010. It was the end of 2010. And in January 2011, I moved up to Denver because I'm like, well, I want to, pursue stand up a little more seriously. And I started going to college at Metro State up here. I'm so like, all right, I'm moving to Denver. But I kept the monthly show at the restaurant I used to work at in Pueblo. So I would come down once a month because it got pretty successful. It might have been the only comedy show in Pueblo at the time, and people liked it. And I think I got a little bit more money. So they're like, yeah, keep coming down. You get to see your family and you do a show once a month. And we were about a year into doing this show. It was October, November 2011. And I booked Kevin O'Brien to headline. He was headlining a show. And once again, the lineup was overbooked. And the audience was very, very rambunctious that night. You had about half the bar there to watch the show. And half the bar didn't know there was a show. They just wanted to talk. So they were combative with the show the whole night. They just weren't paying attention. They weren't listening to me. And if I had been more experienced at the time, would have been able to get like the bar to calm down or talk to them in a way that they would have listened. But I, was being overly aggressive for no reason because I thought that's what I needed to do. And yeah, the show goes off fine. There's about, the first 5 or 6 comics go up. Half of them listen to him, half of them don't. And then Kevin gets on stage and he just lays into the people that aren't listening. And it's going well for the first 10 minutes. Like part of the bar that is listening loves him going off on the crowd. And then it kind of takes a dark turn when one of the women that isn't listening realizes Kevin's talking about her. And he just I remember he looks at this woman and he goes, "This is my dream up here right now. You're ruining my dream." He goes, "What was your dream?" And the woman wouldn't answer him. She's like, "I don't know what my dream is." And he's like, "No, tell me, what was your dream? I know you had a dream at one point." And she's like, it's getting very tense in the room. And then he said something about the city of Pueblo. He's like, "Look, you people live in Pueblo." Then the whole bar turned on him because he shit on the city. The lady's wife, or the lady's husband, tries to run up to Kevin, go after him. My dad has to step in between. I don't know if the guy was going to assault Kevin. It was more just like, I'm going to get in his face and show his boss. So my dad has to step between him and go "Hey, I think the show's over. This isn't your night." So Kevin gets off stage. The table tries to fight him. The restaurant ends up having to call the cops to come to the show and break it up. That's the last time I ever did comedy there. But that was like the first time I had done a show. I'm like, wow, this went terribly wrong. And was it all my fault that the show went that way? No, but there's definitely things I could have done to prevent that from happening just, before the show even started. Because I don't think I let the bar know, hey, we're going to be doing a comedy show right now. I just kind of broke into it and all hell broke loose. So that was a big learning lesson right there.
That is a wild story. Did you host those shows?
Yes, I hosted those shows.
You were doing time up top? Yeah, hosting.
And that was also a good experience because I kind of learned how to host, and I learned how difficult that was, taking the bullet up front, and how important it was to be a good host and do certain things to set a show up for success.
The energy of the audience to just be listening and paying attention. And there's a lot to do there. But sounds like, for just being less than a year in comedy, sounds like a pretty successful show. And you brought comedy to a place that didn't have much comedy. So that's commendable.
It was nice. And I got to, meet a lot of comics that way, to be like, "Hey, I have this show." And a lot of them, were young, starting out just like me, hungry for stage time. So they're like, "Yeah, I'd love to do the show." And it was a good way to make connects early on. So
nice. How did you manage rides, if you can remember that long ago? Would you say "Hey, these 3 comics are coming, maybe you guys can all hop into one car," or were people all driving separately? Do you remember?
I remember I would take comedians with me. Sometimes I had a car.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes I would go down a day early. So I would make sure, I'm like, okay, if so-and-so needs a ride, I would ask another comic, "Hey, can you take so-and-so?" And usually people were pretty good about that.
Yeah. I run shows in Vail that's 100 miles away. So that's a challenge of, the first thing I ask comics whenever they're like, "Hey, can I do your show?" I'm like, "Do you have a car?"
Yeah, no, that's a great thing to ask them. Yeah.
And if they don't have a car, that's okay. I'll find a comic to drive them. And also, if they're maybe not the most terrific comedian in the world, but they have a great car, they can probably get some stage time if they're willing to drive some other comics to the show.
Exactly.
Okay,
funny.
let's fast forward a little bit to shows you're running now.
Okay.
What do you got going on?
Right now I'm running with my girlfriend Katie Bowman, who's also a comedian. We run a show at Sushi High in Denver every Thursday.
Okay. That's
And
like a
that's
famous Denver show. I've never been. Give some explanation to
it's a
the
show. It's been going on since 2014. A guy named John Wilkins started the show. It's in the basement of a sushi restaurant in the Highlands neighborhood of Denver. It's a really cool space. John started it in 2014. He moved back to Baltimore in like 2018, handed the show over to a guy named John Toll, another comedian.
Yeah.
John Toll ran it for about a year and a half. John moved to North Carolina and in 2019 gave it to Katie and me, and we ran it until the pandemic started in March of 2020, and then brought it back in March of 22. So it took like a 2-year hiatus because
Okay.
Sushi High, they were doing like to go only even after, restaurants were allowed to kind of have people in there. They didn't really have any outdoor seating. They didn't have a good space for it. So sushi places can make good money from to go. So they didn't have people back in for a while. And then we finally were able to start the show back up in 22.
Do people eat at the show?
Yeah, it's a dinner show. So it's an interesting, it's a very like Vegas vibe to it where people are having, full meals and watching comedy, which makes it there's a challenge to that because most shows you're doing, people aren't eating like a full meal. So you have to realize like, oh yeah, they're listening and paying attention.
Right, but it's
they may not be laughing right now because they physically can't because their mouth is full of food. That doesn't mean they're not paying attention. So
do people do they pay for the food independently, or does the comedy ticket include dinner? How does that work?
No, they pay for the food independently.
Okay.
When the show started, we're doing a good job of like building it up and getting people in there. It's hard running a weekly show and trying to get people there every week without having people cold calling like a club does or sending out emails like crazy. It's just Katie and me. But when the show started, they had a Groupon, and you pay like a certain price, and it was like a food and drink included, and you got the comedy show. So it was a really good deal that would pack the room every week. But it brought in a lot of terrible people that just wanted cheap sushi and didn't like the comedy, wouldn't watch the show, and a lot of people that wouldn't tip the staff too. So when the comedy show came back, the owner was like, "We're not going to do the Groupon anymore. The people that came in, they were terrible to the staff. It wasn't that beneficial for us. So we're just going to have them pay. We're going to make our money through food and drinks, and then we charge a ticket price, and that's how you guys make money." So
got it. What kind of? So you run the ticketing, right?
Yeah, we have an Eventbrite ticket. So tickets are $15 for the show, and the restaurant keeps $3 of every ticket. We keep 12. And then we also have a flat rate that we get from the restaurant no matter what up top to kind of that just takes care of Katie and me. So it's a good deal.
What kind of do you have to bring equipment in, or are they set up for like music or something?
They have like a little PA system, so it's really convenient. They have a mic and a little PA. The room's not that big, so it doesn't need to be a big setup. So it's no extra work for us on that.
You have lighting or a stage?
Yeah, we bought a little spotlight that it's not the best. We got it on Amazon. It's not. It's kind of like sitting on a ledge in the back, but it lights the comics perfectly, and that really does add something to the show.
Yeah,
it's just one of those nonverbal cues to the audience. Like, all right, this is where you watch right now.
Right. Exactly. Do the comics stand on a stage, or are they on the floor?
They're on the floor. I'm thinking about right now getting a little stage built just so comics can be elevated. I know Ali Kareem. He's been making a few stages for people.
Oh yeah.
So I've been meaning to reach out to him to have one because it helps a little bit just having
gives you some authority.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome. Any crazy stories in the several years you've run Sushi High? Anybody throw a tuna roll at a comic or anything like that?
That hasn't happened yet, thankfully.
Okay.
No.
Good.
Yeah, nothing too crazy. I mean, there's been some bad shows. There was one show where there was 12 people in the audience, which 12 people is not. I mean, the room feels somewhat full. With
What's the capacity?
It probably fits about. You could cram like 75 people in there.
Oh wow. Okay.
But still, that's probably pushing it. If we get like 35, 40, it feels like ridiculously full. Good. So we had a show it was maybe like 15 people, and it was just like a two-top up front, like a couple that came to watch the show, and the other 13 were like a girl's 21st birthday party. and they were sitting at a table in the back, and they just weren't paying attention to any of the show. So they were just having dinner, talking, and there was a couple up front. They were very watching the show closely. And so you're just doing comedy for two people while 13, 21-year-old girls are talking. And it's very annoying, and you want to ask them to leave, but it's, they were making a lot of the money for the show that night. Like, they all paid a ticket price. So I'm like, we're just going to do a short show, get this done as quick as we can, and then get them out of here. And they were also spending a lot on sushi and drinks to eat there. So I was like, okay, well, they're spending money here. Let's just get this done with as quick as we can.
Yeah,
so
that's an important part of show running that I think a lot of people overlook is you have to make sure the venue is happy. You got sacrifices sometimes. You want the comedy show to be a net positive for their business. I mean, they're the ones paying rent and, paying the water bill and all that stuff. So you want them to want you to come back.
Exactly. And they're great to work with. The owner's very supportive. She's helped us with a lot of things. And she's, she's been patient. She's wasn't upset that the room wasn't packed right up. She understands, like, there's things to compete with. And she understands it's kind of an expensive night out that, people can't come and drop $150 on sushi and comedy every week.
Right.
So.
Do you have seasonality? Like, is it harder in the summer to fill the room or harder in the winter when it's snowing?
Well, it depends, right? It's a Thursday show. So right now, football just started. So you have Thursday night football again. Okay. So we're kind of competing with that. I know when the Broncos play on Thursday night, that usually screws the show a little bit, especially if the Broncos are playing at home. Last night was a little bit lighter than we wanted because there was just a lot of stuff in town. Oktoberfest had just started downtown, and then the Great American Beer Fest is here this weekend too, and also the High Plains Comedy Festival is here this weekend. So there's a lot of comedy on South Broadway. So just competing with a lot of stuff. Yeah, early on in the summer, it's hard because people are, we got to get outside and we got to get to the mountains. We just want to spend all the time we can outside. But we were pretty, like, in July and August, we had some really good shows because it was very hot and people get a little burnt out on being outside at that point. They're like, we just want to be, somewhere cool in a basement.
Yep.
Just kind of doing that. And then obviously, November, December seems to be the best time for the show because that's kind of when people are going out. That's when comedy seems to do the best in general. Those 2 months kind of leading up to the holidays. So.
Yeah, people are spending money. Then in January, they're like, where'd all my money go?
Exactly. January is always kind of a lighter month.
Yeah.
And then Valentine's Day comes back around, and then people are like, all right, we're ready to get back out again.
Nice. What kind of mix of out-of-town comics and local comics do you have?
Usually, sometimes it'll be like last week, it was just local comics on the show. We didn't know of any out-of-town comics that were coming through. But pretty typically, there's at least one out-of-town comic on every show. Last night, with High Plains being this weekend, we were able to get 3 comics that were in town from New York that were looking for stage time.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
To do the show. And then sometimes you'll have, comedians traveling together. I know in a couple weeks, we have 3 comics from Minneapolis doing the show. So there's usually at least one out-of-town comic.
Nice. Is it difficult to manage? Like, how many comics do you have per show typically?
Well, we usually have like a headliner, and it's not like a traditional headliner set of like 30 to 45 minutes. The headliner will usually do about 20, and then we'll have 3 or 4 comics doing about 10 minutes up front. So we usually like to have no more than like 5 comics total on the show.
Okay. Right on. So that's 250 comics a year, though. That's a sizable number. How do you manage that? You have like a spreadsheet, and and you're running it with Katie. Like, how do you?
We have we try to message each other about which, like, hey, can we book so and so for this date? They reached out to me because people reach out to both of us to do the show. So we have a Google Doc with every week, and then if we book someone, we put them on there. If someone drops, we can go in there and cancel it. And then we have a list of people. It's mainly local comics under all the dates, saying people who we want to have on the show and the last time they did the show. So say we have,
oh, nice. That's smart.
Like, Charlie Cohen, a comic in town that we both know.
Yeah.
We'll have him on there and say, all right, when was the last time Charlie did it? Oh, sorry, it was May of this year. So we can be like, oh, okay, we can kind of book him again for another spot. Or, there's another local comic, and we notice, we've never had them on the show. So let's let's put them on the
Yeah,
show.
somebody moves to town, you add them to the list, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Huh. That's cool.
But it is.
And then, sorry, in that Google Doc, is it like newest show at the top, and then
Yeah,
the history goes down? Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Huh. Cool. It must be like a huge document by now after
It is
several
pretty big.
years.
Yeah. No, it is. It is for sure. And we don't. We usually will reach out to local comics. We have no. I mean, out of town comics hit us up constantly, but there's not a lot of reaching out to book people. People are hitting us up, so
Yeah.
it can be a bit much, but it also makes it more convenient because we're not like, oh, we need to find 3 comedians for this week. I think we're booked at least 2 months out now, so
Nice.
there's
Yeah.
none of that. But
Yeah, and it's easy if you had a fallout. Like there's 300 comics in Denver. It's probably pretty easy to get somebody last minute.
exactly, and there's a few comics that I've talked to. I mean, they're bona fide headliners. I've never booked them to headline because they're on the road a lot. They have a bunch of other commitments. But I've talked to them and like, hey, if you're around and someone drops out last minute, that's when I'm going to reach out to you and be like, hey, you want to come close out the show for X amount of money, and they're cool with that. And I've done that with a few people.
Nice. That's
So,
cool.
yeah.
What do you guys do if neither of you are available on a Thursday, or just one of you is available? I assume that must be a nice thing about having a Katie to co-run it with. Like if she's booked on something, you could host, and vice versa.
Exactly. That is nice. Like we were both there last night. Like last Thursday, she had a show, so I ran it. Next Thursday, I have to work, so she's going to do it, and that does make it. It makes it more fun for us too, because we don't necessarily have to be there every week, so we don't get sick of it or burnt out on the show. It keeps it fresh for us. But I think it's only been one time where neither of us were able to be there, and I think that was we were going to see her family for one of the holidays, maybe, and we just found a guest host, and we talked to the owner like, hey, this isn't the person who's going to run the show, and it's pretty.
Right.
I mean, they don't have any equipment to set up, and just get someone that you trust, and then take care of it. That's how we actually took over the show, because John Toll couldn't be there a lot of the time. He would get gigs on Thursdays, and we were guest hosting for him a lot of the time.
Okay, nice.
So, yeah,
that's great. Who's like any really exciting booking wins, like big people that you've had come drop in at a show? Like you already dropped the Sam Talent, Nathan Lund lineup, which is a pretty good one. But anything else in that category?
Well, I produced two other shows in Pueblo, the past one this year and one last year. I was able to get Eddie Pepitone to come.
Whoa, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I know his feature, a guy named JT Habersat.
Yeah, sure.
He runs the Altercation Fest in Austin, and I did a show that he ran down there like 5 years ago. So I had a relationship with him. So he reached out to me early last summer and was like, hey, we're going to be in Colorado. Someone told me you've done shows in Pueblo before. We have this date. Could you set up something for Eddie and I in Pueblo? And I was able to set it up last year. The show went well. They had fun. And then they were coming back through again this year. So we set up another show for them. So just being able to, put on a show with, Pepitone headlining in Pueblo has been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. What venue? Like, describe the venue. Is it like a theater or?
It's a place. It's called Brews Brothers Ale House. So it's like a brewery in Pueblo. It's actually in an old police station. So it's this really old building. It's a restaurant and a brewery, and they have like a separate showroom that's really nice. And they usually have bands there. And I think it's the first time they've ever done comedy is when they have us. But it's, probably seats about 100, 110 people. Really nice little space. And
How did you, so since you're not living in Pueblo, how did you market the show? Or did it just kind of sell out on its own because of Pepitone or?
This year we only had about 50 people there. It was a lot lighter this year because the state fair was in town when we were doing the show. I completely forgot that the Colorado State Fair is in Pueblo every year. I forgot that was going on. And the big thing was Gabriel Iglesias was doing a show in Pueblo that night too at the state fair. Man. Yeah. So we were competing with Fluffy. So anyone, and he's a huge, he's a huge.
He did the Pepsi Center. He did Ball Arena. Sold it out. Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing the Colorado State Fair Event Center. That show sold out, so we still had people that Pepitone has his following of diehard. So people came from the Springs to see him. There's a couple people, and they were there last year. They came from New Mexico to see him because
cool.
Pueblo's like 4 hours away from New Mexico, but they're like, this is as close as Pepitone's going to get. He's not coming to Albuquerque, so we'll go see
Right.
him in Pueblo. That's what we're going to do. But yeah, the guy who owns that venue, I went to school with him. He's a guy named Tony Garcia, so I've known him my whole life. So
Oh,
he was
okay.
pretty good. He's very, very smart, has a good marketing team. He promotes all of his stuff on Instagram, has posters and stuff like that. And I kind of just do, like, I reach out to people individually, like people that I know that still live there, or people I grew up with, like, hey, this is what we're doing. I'd love to see. I'd send out like Facebook message blasts or some emails periodically here or there. And then, I think I was able to get maybe 10 or 15 people that way. But most of the marketing was done on their end. Like they do a really good job. So it's a good venue to work with.
That's awesome. All right. We got a couple questions from our viewer in North Carolina. First one is, it's going back to when you had that 21-year-old birthday party. Would you ever go to the owner if distractions get out of hand at a venue generically, not necessarily Sushi High? And would you ever consider switching venues if things got really bad?
Yeah, I mean, what those girls were doing. I mean, they were just talking and but they weren't doing anything like super disrespectful. If they were, getting combative or, like yelling at the comedians or treating the staff like shit, then I would go get the owner. But it was just typical, like they just weren't paying attention. So it was just kind of, it's just one of those. It's like they're just annoying. What are we gonna do? And yeah, I mean, as far as the switching venues things, if it ever gets to a point where, I don't know, like I don't see us ever, not switching Sushi High anytime soon, because we're not going to find owners that are, more supportive of them and they want to work with us in that way. But maybe if the venue is, they're getting weird about pay, like they don't want to give you money for certain shows, or I don't know, they don't, that's really the main thing. It's the money thing, where if they want you to do more for the show with less pay, they want you to handle more responsibilities, like, getting posters made or doing the promoting. And there are venues like that. It's like, just do all the work, make my venue a lot of money, but I don't want to share any of that money with you. Then it's time to go to another venue. And we've worked with venues like that in the past, like where they want their business to do well, but they don't want to do any of the promoting. They don't want to do any of the legwork as far as, putting up a couple posters in their venue. And we've had successful shows other places where it's like, all right, this is a Wednesday night. We're bringing in way more people than you normally would have. And then you're trying to get, an extra $50 out of them, and they don't want to do that. It's like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to be
a partnership. Yeah,
exactly.
It's time to move on. And you're at a point. It's kind of like stage time. When I feel like with show running, when you start show running, you'll pretty much take any venue you can find. Yeah. But I feel like at some point you get pretty good at show running, and it's like you can be choosy. And if people aren't nice to you and they're not a good partner, you just move on. You go to a different venue.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Another question from North Carolina. I'm gonna rephrase it a little bit. So Pueblo isn't Denver. It's not a big city. How do you sell a place like that to comedians? Do you have to offer more money when you're booking people in that kind of place?
I mean, early on when I was doing the shows down there, it's just, I was working with comics that just wanted stage time so bad. And just the idea of going anywhere on the road, they're like, oh yeah, let's just go do a show there. So it's easy to get comics like that. But, someone like, Eddie Pepitone, that's a very, specific type of situation, or he's on a run doing other shows. Like he was doing the Comedy Fort, he was doing the Denver Comedy Underground, and, he has a couple like days in between, and it's like, all right, well, now I can go do a show in a place like Pueblo, because I think he was doing a club in Utah the next day. So JT and him were flying out of the Springs. The Springs is close to Pueblo. So they're like, you know what, we can go and we'll do this show. And then it's great. It would be one thing if I was, getting Pepitone. I think he lives in LA. If I was getting him to specifically come from LA to Colorado just to do a show in Pueblo, like he still I was able to pay him a decent amount of cash that made it worth its time, but he was also already here, was looking to fill a date.
Yeah. And it's a market.
He didn't make what Gabriel Iglesias made that night.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But in the plus column, it's a market that's far enough from Denver and Fort Collins that it's not going to
Yeah,
compete with audience.
exactly. Yeah, Pueblo is its own thing. Like I said, the people from New Mexico came, so it's Southern
Right.
Colorado, and
Yeah.
those people
Yeah,
came out there.
I think the question was more generically like, let's say you ran a monthly in Pueblo, how would you
Mhm.
motivate Denver comics to go there? And I think you answered it in the beginning. It's just people want stage time. They'll go.
Mhm.
And especially if the room is fun. That's what I found is almost as motivating as money is
Mhm.
like, is it a good show? Nobody wants to drive 2 hours to do that 21-year-old birthday party
Yeah,
show, you know? But
yeah.
if you're consistently filling a room with audiences that are
Mhm.
hungry for comedy, then that's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, people want to do good shows. And
Yeah.
you obviously have to, like, what I was paying early on, that's not what I pay now. Like, if I were to run another monthly show in Pueblo, I would, definitely make it worth the while for the headliner and whoever else I was booking on the show. I'd probably
Yeah.
drive everybody down and, maybe make it sure. The venue that I started at in Pueblo, the restaurant I worked at, would give every comedian free food too. So that was a huge
That's big.
selling point as well,
Big.
which was
I,
really nice. And if I could still, if I could work out a situation like that now, that would be great
yeah,
too.
I did a show Wednesday that I run and we get free barbecue. And it's like, I mean, we run
Yeah,
up like $200 tab. I mean, it's
yeah,
expensive. Barbecue's expensive. It's
yeah,
really good food and everybody
yeah,
gets a full meal and dessert
yeah.
and whatever they
It's
want.
nice. If you
It's a
can
huge,
pay and feed people, like they're usually happy.
it's a huge perk. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, we're running out of time. We got to wrap
Okay.
this up. Any fun road stories for you? You've been out traveling outside of Colorado doing some comedy?
I have been doing that more in the past year. I went to Atlanta for the first time this year to do some
Cool.
shows. I'm actually going to LA for the first time in a couple weeks to do shows out there, see what
Fun.
that's all about. Never been there, which is exciting.
Do you know
Went
what
to New
shows you're
York.
doing?
I'm doing Chatterbox one night,
Okay.
and we have I can't remember the names off the top of my head. I'm doing Ron Lynch has a show out there. It's kind of like a variety show that he
Okay.
does on Saturdays, and we're doing that. Those are the only two I remember off the top of my head. Oh,
Are you,
and Kara Clank and Jared Logan have a show that we're doing. I forget the name of it, but we're
okay.
doing their Wednesday show, so I'm
Are
very
you
excited about that.
are you flying or driving?
We're flying out there.
Okay. And do you have friends with a car?
Um,
How are you doing that?
the plan. I think we're gonna.
I'll just tell you the first time I went to LA, I didn't bring a car and it was a disaster because I didn't
No,
realize
you
how
definitely.
big LA is.
No, I think we're gonna rent a car. The thing, because I'm going out
Oh,
there with Katie. The deal we worked is, I bought our plane tickets, and she's gonna take care of the rental car.
oh,
And
nice.
we're
Okay, so you'll
staying
have
with
a car. That's
yeah,
great.
we're staying with a friend that has an extra room, so we're saving money. We don't have to pay for a place to stay, so we'll spend that on the rental. And then,
That's amazing.
but as far as like road stories, I mean, like the worst gig I ever did was once again in Pueblo, Colorado, and it wasn't the. I have a bunch of interesting stories from my hometown, and it wasn't the show I did with Kevin headlining where the cops had to get called. It was a show at another bar down there called the Senate. It's called the Senate Bar, and I was probably maybe 2 years into stand up at this point. It was like early 2012, and I got hit. I forget who hit me up, but they knew I was from Pueblo, and it was like, hey, it's like a benefit show, and we have like a band, we have all this other stuff, a DJ. We'd love to have a comedian, and just wanting any gig at that point, I'm like, yes, let's do the show. I can't wait to do this. So it turns out it's a benefit for a biker that had just passed away. So this biker that had just passed away. So the audience is all just bikers. Like it's probably 40 or 50 bikers and like some of their families and the guy's mom is there and like their wife. So it's all guys in like leather jackets, just kind of hardcore looking dudes. I'm sure they're all nice, but it's off putting when you're doing a show in front of a room full of bikers. And I
Right.
especially didn't have the experience at that point. So I'm in the room, just I don't know who's running the show. I don't know who to talk to. There's a DJ on stage, and he's playing music, and he just says something, just kind of mumbles into the mic, and I hear him say my name, and he brings me up on stage, doesn't tell anyone what I'm there for or what I'm gonna do, and I have to get up there, and I'm like, hey guys, I'm a comedian, and they already don't like me. I'm just getting like, there was no heckling, no booing, but just the looks I was getting from these guys. And I did like 10 minutes. They were disgusted. I felt horrible. I ran off stage, and it was so sweet. The guy who passed, his mom was there. She was very sweet. She's like, "Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you doing that." And I was like, "All right, that's very kind. She's such a nice woman." And I'm just kind of hanging out in the back, having a drink, like, "Oh God, that was terrible," thinking about leaving. And then the next thing they did, they're like, "All right, we're gonna do yogurt wrestling now." So they had like these girls in bikinis, and I guess they couldn't find Jello, because that's normally what you do. It's Jello wrestling. So like, yeah, it's the girls are gonna come out and we're gonna do some yogurt wrestling. And they had this yogurt that had been sitting in a kiddie pool for God knows how long. And then they bring it out, not thinking like, oh, you just can't have yogurt out for that long. And the girls start wrestling in it, and the room, it smells like it's bad, like curdled yogurt. So like the bikers are like, half of them are almost throwing up. They're like, oh, they're like leaving the room while these poor girls in bikinis are slopping around in yogurt. And I was like, well, this is show business, I guess, huh?
Yeah. At least you didn't have to follow that. The like literal stink of it.
No, and it smelled terrible. And I just remember thinking, like, I thought it was my fault. I'm like, like, I felt bad still. I'm like, I'm sorry they had to
follow you. I mean, I guess you watch that and you think, well, it could be worse. Like,
exactly.
I just bombed horrifically, but at least I'm not slopping around in spoiled yogurt.
Yeah.
That's a wild story. That's great. All right, Brad, you're amazing. How can people find you?
On Instagram, I'm Denver Cheddar. That's my name. So at Denver Cheddar. Yeah. There, I'm still on Twitter. I guess it's called X now, under Brad Galli. So if anyone's still on that app, you can follow me on. Yeah.
Check him out. And
but
Sushi High every Thursday.
Instagram. Yeah. And BradGalliComedy.com. So.
Oh, nice. BradGalliComedy.com. I'm sure you can find links to the Instagram and Twitter or X.
Yeah, that's all on there. And there's links to buy tickets to Sushi High on the Instagram too, so you'll see everything.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a great time in Los Angeles. It was great talking to you, and I hope to see you on stage sometime soon.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Mark.
I'm gonna stop this now. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next Monday on Always Bookin